This is an absolute beginner's tutorial that shows you how to use basic HTML and vanilla CSS to build a login interface like this. One of the key CSS concepts that we're going to be using a lot in this tutorial is Flexbox. And I know a lot of people have issues appreciating how to use Flexbox. So I'm going to use it heavily in this tutorial just to show you exactly how to use it for a layout like this. To be able to build this, you will require these images and the logos. As you can see them, I'm going to add them to the GitHub repo. Check the video description for a link to the GitHub repo so you can grab the images for your own use. Also, for any web development project that you are given, if you want to code the interface, you have to be able to divide the interface into various parts so you are able to write the HTML code for it. And in this our case, if you look critically, you find out that we have the background, which is like the body part, the background of it. Then we have a section within it, which is this white portion. And within this white portion, even the contents within the white portion, we can divide them into various parts. So we can have like the top part, which is like the heading and the sub heading or text here. Then we have the input boxes as well. Then this serves as a divider between them. Then we have the logos, which is the images on that stretch. Then finally the button here. So this is with this idea, we're going to now use Flexbox to lay them out like that. I'll be using VS Code as my text editor, but feel free to use any text editor of your choice. In VS Code, I've created an empty index.html file and styles.css file. But in addition to that, I have created a directory called img, and within img, I've put my images. That is the logos that we're going to be working with. So go ahead and do same, download the images and put them here. Let's begin by writing out our HTML, and to get a boilerplate code, you can hit the exclamation with enter in VS Code and change this to digital hero and save that. We have our main session. Then within main, we can create, say, an article. And this article will be the white background. Within the article, the content in there, as I told you, could be divided into different parts. So let's create 4 of these divisions. Then let's start giving these classes. This first one, let's call it login screen. And now we can go to the next. Within it, say this class would be login screen __. Let's call this headings. So that will be the part that contains the headings. This will be an H3 with a text digital hero. And we have paragraph with a text sign in with email. Now the next one will be the input boxes. So for the inputs, we can create a class and call that class login screen __. Inputs. And within here, we can now go ahead and create our inputs. The first one is supposed to be an email. Let's name it email and give it a placeholder of ahonia@obed.com. So this placeholder is what will show in there. And let's do same for password. Type is password. Let's give it a name of password and give it a placeholder of type, or say enter your password. Great. Now the last bit is beneath those we had some tests over here. This particular test I'll continue with. So let's copy that and go back here and put it here. The other thing is that there is this line and we need to create that line. We'll do that with CSS, but for now, let's put an empty span here and give it a class divider so that we will use CSS to create that line. Great. The next one would be the logos. So we can go ahead and create a class and call this class login underscore logos. Then within this, we have the images. But then if you pay particular attention, you realize that the images have this gray background, which are more like rectangles. So we want to put those ones within a div, and we'll start the div with that background. And also the images are clickable. That means we have to create anchor tags for them. So we go ahead and create the anchor tags, then set it to hash for now. We will now need the image. We'll put in the image and the alt text, but I just want to, okay, so just to be able to duplicate this and hurry up with it. The source for the image, I have it in the directory called img, so select that and now choose the Google. The first one was Google, so we can put Google here. The next one is Meta, so let's choose the image in Meta, then put here Meta logo. Do same for this image, but Apple. Then here we put Apple's logo. Great. We are almost through with our HTML. The last bit is the login button. So also let's call it login screen underscore say btn, right? And within this, we'll now create an input and call it, the type should be a submit type. For the name, we can call it login, and for value, let's give it a value called login. Okay, so now we are good. We can start. Let me open this in a browser. So I use an extension called live server, and that gives me this go live option to click on, and it opens in the browser. This is the HTML that we've written, which is exactly what we have here, but we need to style it. The first thing you would have noticed is that even though we are yet to style it, there is some space at the side. So on the left side, you can see that there is some small space between the edge of the browser and the content, as well as the top. There is that space. So just so you know, the browser by default has its own styles. It has some styles, and we need to override that by resetting those to 0. And I'm going to do that shortly. The one thing I want you to take note of is that the font family that is used here is different from what the browser's default is giving us. So we want to grab our own font family, and that can be found when you go to fonts.google.com. So when you go to font.google.com, search for the font Inter, and now when you see Inter, select it and choose the font sizes that you want. I have already selected most of these, so you would have to choose them. Anyway, let me go back to my browser. In here, I've already selected them. So as soon as you add the ones that you want, then you can proceed and click. So you can see here, the ones that are removed are the ones I've already added: 400, 500, 600, 700. I've added those ones, and just by default, it will select link. So go ahead and choose import and copy by clicking on this copy icon. Let's go back into our code editor, and in style space this here, we don't want this style tag because we are in the CSS file, not HTML. And now we've imported it here, but we would have to use the family, the font family, for it to be applicable. So the first thing we want to do is to reset everything by using asterisk. The browser defaults, margin, we'll set it to 0. Let's set padding to also 0. Let's set border to 0. And let's set box sizing to border box and text decoration. So there are a lot more that you can reset, but these are the ones that I want to reset for now. And let's proceed to create our body. So with body, we are targeting the whole body. as we have here. So this particular element that we have here is what we are targeting, and we want to set the background color of this. No, so before I set the background color, to make things easy, let's create variables, CSS variables that we can reuse for our color. So to create that, we start with our column, then root, then let's create the names of the variable should start with this hyphen hyphen and the name of the variable, column, the value that you want to give it. So this is how you declare it, but I have already created some. So these are the ones I've created. The background is this color, the BG deep is this, then we'll be using this. It makes it easy for us to reuse, and that is why we created this. So let's go on and show you how you can use it. Background color, to use the variable that we created, we say var, that's the keyword we use, then the parenthesis followed by the name of the variable we want to use. So in this case, we want to use BG deep. Save this, and nothing is happening here because we are yet to link our CSS to our HTML. So let's go into the head and link it, called link, and now add styles.css. Save this, and voila, we have the background has changed. The font size is yet to change, so let's work on that in getting the font size by setting font family to enter. That is what we did, and yes, now the font has changed, but then we want this white background. So how do we get that white background? If you come in here, I told you that the article is a part where we are going to have the white background. So let's start this login screen by copying the class name, and when we come here, class can be targeted with a dot, say dot, then the class name. That is how we select classes. So I've selected that particular part, and I'll set the background color to our variable called white. And now when we go back, you see that our background is white, but we don't want it covering this whole length. So what we can do is to set the width of this to say 30 viewport width. And when we save that, you see that we have created this. The next thing we want to do is to set this in the center somewhere, because we don't want it at the top right. So to be able to do that, we need to first display flex, say display flex. And once we display flex, this is what we have, but let's push it to the middle by using margin. And we set the top and bottom to say 10 rem, and set this to auto. So the left and right is set to auto so that it is forced. Flex actually forces it to take up the whole space that is available. It belongs to it. So as soon as we say the margin left and right should be auto, it takes up as much space as it can take. Then the rest is used as the margin, equal margins on both sides. So that is what we achieve. And you see that it pushes it to the middle. But now the content in here are all flexed horizontally, because by default the flex direction is set to be horizontal. So it pushes everything horizontally, but that's not what we want. We want each of them to sit on top of the other. That is supposed to be column. So we set our flex direction, set flex direction to be column. And now we go back to it. You see what we have here. They are all sitting on top of the other, but we see that our items within this white box are stuck to the very bottom, or the margin, the left margin. We don't want it that way. We want them to be in the middle as we have here. They are supposed to be centered. To be able to achieve that, we need to use align items. So we align items center, and once we do that, they come in the middle. There is supposed to be some space at the top and at the bottom as we have here, but we currently do not have it here. So let's go ahead and add some padding. So with paddings, we can add padding to the top and bottom, say 5 rem top and bottom, then 0 for left and right, because there's already space there. So now we have it right. We can decide to go in, but before then, when you look at each of these, there is enough spacing between them, but we don't have that here. So let's do that now. by giving this a gap. The gap would be 2 rem. Save that. Great, we have enough space. Now we can narrow down and focus on this part alone, that is the heading part as we created in the HTML. This is what we called it, login screen __ headings. So let's select that part and try styling it. What do we want here? The first thing is that these two needs to be centrally aligned, but now they are not like that. So how do we achieve that? We can do that with test align and set that to center. Great, they are now centered, and there should be some space between the two of them as we have here. So we can go ahead and use the gap to set 1 rem between them. Great. Okay, this, it looks small, but then let's see, how about try 2 rem. This is, oh, it's not working here. So now I know why. We haven't set it to display flex, so it's not obeying that. Let's set it to display flex, and we may have to choose the flex direction to column so that it sits on top of each other. Flex direction is column. Great, and now we have enough space between them. We can focus on digital hero alone and set its size, font size. Okay, so to focus on digital heroes alone, when we come to the HTML, we see that it is the H3 within this. So we can still go ahead and select the class, this class, and now H3, and within the H3 we can set the font size to say 2 rem. Let's save that and see. Great, we have something close to what we have here. So we are done with the first part. Now let's focus on our inputs. When you look here, we see the inputs, they sit one on top of the other. So we have to do something like that, and we can achieve that with flex. Let's see, in our HTML CSS, the input is within this container login screen _ input. So we go ahead and select that. And after selecting this, the first thing we want to do is to displace flex, and remember to set the flex direction to column, and that gives us what we are looking for. But there should be some space between these, so we can go ahead and give it a gap of say 1 rem, and voila, we have some space between them. But can we, so now we can see that the width, this is very small. So can we increase the width? Let's increase the width to say 70% of available space. Great, we have the width increase now. By default, there are no borders to this until we click on it to see the outline, and the reason is because in our resets, the browser resets, we set border to be 0, so there's no border. If I take this away, you can see that by default there is some border there, but now we decided to override that so that we'll control it with our CSS. Okay, so let's go on and add some border to what we have. Border, yeah, so I just remembered that the border is supposed to be applied directly to the input text itself. So let's look at that. Oh, I made a mistake here, goodness. Okay, so this is the input element inside the login screen _ input. So we need to select that specifically by appending this and saying inputs. Great, and now we can set the border. We set it to solid and set the color to be the background color, which we set here, this particular color. Then we set the size to be 0.02 rem. So now let's go take a look at it ourselves. This is what we're looking for, and it's still slim, so we want to increase the size, that is the size within it. Let's give it some padding, give it 1 rem padding, top and bottom. Then let's do 0 for left and right, and now you can see we have enough space top and down. but then the placeholder and everything that is inside is attached to the very end. So let's change this from 0 to say 1 rem to give it enough room. Great. This is what we are looking for. That is good. Okay, so we have styled this. The last bit within here is when I click within this, like when the input box is in focus, you can see the blue outline that shows up. We need to implement that. Currently it's a black outline, so we need to create one for ourselves. And also this has this rounded edge, and we need to get the rounded edge as well. So to get a rounded edge, this is what we do. We use border radius. Let's use a small one, 0.45 rem, and save that. Great, we now have the border edge. So let's move on and focus on the when it's in focus. If you want a particular state of it, like in focus, this is how we grab that. When it's in focus, we want to set the outline to 1 pixel, and it should be solid with the background, the color being BTN, and the BTN color is the blue color that we set up here. So we can go ahead now, save this, and when we go there, you see that when it's in focus, now we get that blue color. Great. The next thing is to style this or continue with, and when you look at it here, there's enough space between these two, so we may have to increase the space, then finally work on this particular vertical bar that is aligned centrally with this. So how do we grab that particular text? The text is the paragraph tag within the login screen input. So let's select that. Select this P, and now we want to increase the space. That's the first thing we talked about. So let's give it 1 rem space. Let's see if 1 rem is enough. Yeah, I think it's enough. Oh, this is the old one. Yeah, so it's enough. And let's focus on the dividing line, this particular line. You remember we created an empty span here. This particular span is empty, but we're using CSS to create that line. We called the class divider. So let's select that class. And once selected, we want to display this as inline block and set the vertical align to middle. Give it a height of 1 pixel. Then let's give it a width that would be enough to cover it. I calculated that by trial and error, and I got 66%. So you need to give it a color so that it is going to show up. So background color will be set to the BG color that we set, and we want it to be on the side of the text. So give it a margin, say 5 pixels. Okay, let's see what we have, and now we have it here. Great. So we are on track to finishing up. We now want to arrange our logos. They should be horizontally arranged, and they should have this rectangular objects around them. So now to grab those images, we come to login screen __ logos, and we'll be able to style that. But to have them display horizontally, we need to use flex. So display flex, and by default flex displays to the direction is horizontal. So now you find it displayed horizontally. But then when we look at the original one, there is enough space between these images, but ours has no space within it. So let's create some space by passing gap of 2 rem. That gives us the space, and as you can see, we have space. But these background, the gray background, are bigger than what we have. In fact, this is just the one that came with the image, but over here we have a rectangular one that has been added as a background. And when we're creating the HTML, I mentioned to you, that's why I added this div container. So we're going to select the div container. We're going to select the div container within this logos part. So I just go ahead and say this and select the div, and I want to set a background color of this to the off-white, Then the next thing I want to do is to add some padding so that they increase the size. The top and bottom would be a bit smaller, so say 0.25, and the left and right would be 1.5 rem. Oh, I needed to add rem here. Then now let's save this and go take a look at them. Great. So we have what we have here, the same thing we have here. So now the last bit is to style the button, and the button is blue in color with this, so we need to go select that. If we come to our HTML, you see that this login screen underscore underscore button is a container where we have this input, but then that was the container. So now we need to select the input itself. So I come here and I say this and go ahead to select the input. And what I want is for me to have a background color of the variable btn, that's button, and I want to also add some padding to it to increase the size, because as you can see now it looks so small. We need to have some size around it, so that we can start with say 1.2 rem for top and bottom, then 7 rem for left and right to stretch it enough. Then we may want to change the color. So without changing the color, let's see how it looks like. So the color is black, but here it was white. So let's change the color, and also there is some curve at the edges. Let's bring that in as well. So color will be white. The font size too was a bit small, so let's increase it to 1.2 rem. And now add our border radius, which is supposed to be 0.5 rem, small one. And great, now we have everything just as it is here. Yes, so that is how we use HTML and CSS to create a basic design like this. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, go ahead and give the video a thumbs up, and also if you are yet to subscribe to the channel, go ahead and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. If you have any questions based on this that I did or any other, go ahead and drop it in the comment. And if you have any request or video that you think I should create, put it in the comments or reach out to me on any social media platform at ehoniaobe.com, but preferably reach out on Twitter. I look forward to bringing you more tutorials like this, so do also subscribe if you haven't, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.